The clinking of silverware echoed through the private dining room, delicate and refined, yet somehow unnervingly loud to Corvin Hale. The wealthy CEO sat stiffly at the end of a long white tablecloth table, surrounded by investors who judged with their eyes long before they judged with their words. Across from him, Brielle Hart sat upright, hands neatly folded in her lap, looking far calmer than Corvin felt. But he recognized the subtle signs, the faint tightening of her fingers, the slight lift of her shoulders, that betrayed her nerves. Everything was riding on this dinner. His company's expansion, his reputation, his board's trust, and perhaps something more personal, something he wasn't ready to name. The lead investor, Hollis, leaned forward, adjusting his glasses with a critical squint. His voice carried a tone that had punctured many executives before Corvin ever sat at this table. "So Brielle," Hollis said casually, though the question was anything but, "You, the woman who's been accompanying Mr. Hale to these events lately. I'm curious, how exactly did you two meet?" It was the question Corvin had feared since the moment they walked in. His fingers froze around his glass. The contract, the secrecy, the expectations. Nothing about this arrangement was meant to be public. He could feel the weight of every gaze shift toward Brielle. The judgment, the curiosity, the hidden skepticism. How does a broke girl end up beside a wealthy CEO? Corvin opened his mouth, ready to intervene, but Brielle gently touched the edge of her napkin, inhaled slowly, and lifted her gaze. And then she spoke. "We met," she began, her voice calm but full of quiet meaning, because sometimes people need support, and sometimes they don't know how to ask for it. The room fell into a hush, surprised, attentive. Even Corvin stilled. Brielle continued, her tone steady but tender, as if she were choosing every word for its weight and its truth. "Corvin carries a lot," she said, "more than most people ever see. His work isn't just numbers and meetings. It affects people, communities, companies who rely on him. And the pressure on someone like him can be overwhelming." Hollis raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. Investors exchanged looks, but Brielle wasn't finished. "I'm not here to impress anyone," she said softly. "I'm here because everyone deserves someone by their side at the table, even the people who seem like they need no one." Corvin felt something crack open gently in his chest. Because her words weren't exposing the contract. Her words were exposing him, who he truly was beneath the polished suit and practiced composure. And that was the moment everything in Corvin Hale's life began to shift. Chapter 1. A man who had everything, except ease. Corvin Hale's office sat on the 29th floor, high enough that the city below looked like a moving map. Cars glided through intersections like controlled simulations. Pedestrians became dots in motion, and inside that towering room, Corvin stood alone, quietly absorbing the weight of another demanding day. His office was immaculate, almost too immaculate. Minimalist desk, organized files, a single small plant sitting bravely in the corner, somehow thriving despite being forgotten most days. People saw Corvin's life and assumed it must be perfect. He was wealthy, influential, well-respected in the cybersecurity world. But the truth was far more complicated. Corvin Hale did not thrive in social situations. He could dominate a technical meeting with ease, lead clients, strategize, deliver solutions. But ask him to mingle with investors, entertain guests, engage in small talk about weather patterns or vacation homes. He'd rather debug a corrupted server for 8 straight hours. But the world of success was changing. No longer did CEOs only need to be brilliant. They needed to be likable, relatable, charismatic. And Corvin, well, he was many things, but he was not charismatic. When the email came from his board, demanding he attend the upcoming investor retreat with a partner, his stomach sank. Appearances matter. 3 simple words that made him feel exposed. He didn't date. He barely had free time. He barely had emotional space. Yet the message kept replaying in his head. He considered reaching out to someone from his past, an old friend, an acquaintance. anyone who could stand beside him without drawing attention. But he knew the truth. He didn't have anyone. Not anymore. People drifted away when work consumed him. Or maybe he drifted first. It was hard to tell. That was how he found himself staring at a discreet link sent by a colleague he barely knew. A short-term professional companionship agency. Not a dating service. Not something scandalous. Just someone to accompany him to events and make him appear less isolated. Corvin clicked it reluctantly. The form was surprisingly simple. He hovered over the line asking, "What are you looking for in a companion?" After a long pause, he typed, "Someone calm, kind, someone who can handle social settings with grace." "I don't have—" Then, almost embarrassed, he added, "and someone who won't judge me for needing help." He stared at the screen. "This is ridiculous," he said quietly, but he submitted it anyway. Chapter 2. The girl whose life wouldn't slow down. Across the city, life looked very different. Brielle Hart stood behind the counter of the small cafe where she worked mornings, her apron dusted with coffee grounds and her braids slightly undone from rushing between orders. She wasn't the type who fit into glossy spaces or high society expectations, but she was the type who smiled through exhaustion and made strangers feel seen. Her life, however, was anything but easy. Rent was overdue. Her car made a clicking noise that sounded like a mini ticking bomb, and she worked 2 jobs that drained her energy faster than she could refill it. But she handled struggles the way she handled everything, with humor. A customer once complained that their latte had the emotional warmth of a breakup. Brielle nearly snorted. Her co-worker Taryn nudged her during a lull. "There's a gig," Taryn whispered. "Temporary companionship. Pays crazy good." Brielle blinked. "Companionship? Like pet sitting for lonely millionaires?" "No," Taryn laughed. "Like fancy events. Rich people hire someone to look presentable next to them. It's basically standing there and not spilling anything." "That's a job?" "It is now." That night, Brielle looked up the agency while wrapped in a blanket in her chilly apartment. She didn't expect to qualify. She didn't see herself as glamorous or high-end. But she filled out the form honestly, adding a line that came to her naturally. "I'm reliable, friendly, and will try not to embarrass anyone unless it seems helpful." She laughed and hit submit. She truly didn't think anything would come of it. Chapter 3. The interview that shouldn't have worked. Corvin Hale arrived early. He always did. Punctuality was one of the few things he could control in a world that constantly felt unpredictable. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of the waiting area, hands clasped tightly behind him, scanning. The minimalist decor with the expression of a man trying to appear relaxed but internally pacing miles. He had reviewed over 20 profiles. None felt right. They were polished, sophisticated, highly trained in manners and etiquette. Exactly the kind of people expected at high society events. And exactly the kind of people who made Corvin feel like he needed to rehearse every sentence before speaking. He rubbed his thumb anxiously against his palm. The director stepped out of her office. "Mr. Hale, your candidate is here." Corvin straightened instantly. "Great. Yes, I'm ready." Then Brielle Hart walked in. She paused, spotted Corvin, and gave a smile so nervous it felt like a whispered apology. "Hi," she said. "Sorry, I rehearsed a more confident greeting in my head, but it escaped." Corvin blinked. This was not who he expected. The director gestured them into the conference room. The space was elegant, white walls, dark table, soft lighting, and Brielle sat carefully, as if afraid she might accidentally offend the furniture. "I promise I'm usually less awkward," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Usually." Corvin let out a tiny breath through his nose, something dangerously close to a laugh. The director began outlining the expectations. Professional appearance, respect for boundaries, strict confidentiality, no assumptions of romance or physical closeness. Understanding that this was a business arrangement, not a personal one, Corvin nodded along like he was taking an exam. Brielle nodded like she was trying to agree hard enough to vibrate into the chair. When the director asked why she wanted the job, Brielle paused. I don't want it, she said honestly. I need it. Rent is late. Life is lifing. But I also don't want to make things harder for you. I will try very, very hard not to do anything weird. She hesitated. Well, anything extremely weird. Corvin's lips twitched. The director looked between them, then continued. Brielle flipped open her notebook to reveal nothing but an empty page. I didn't know what to take notes on, she admitted. So I drew a tiny motivational cactus instead. She angled the notebook. A very uneven cartoon cactus, waved enthusiastically next to the words, "You've got this." Corvin stared at it and laughed under his breath. It was small, quiet, but real. Something in that laugh startled him. Something in that vulnerability startled Brielle too. The director excused herself after finishing the briefing, giving Corvin a moment to reflect. "Would you like to see other candidates?" she asked before leaving the room. Corvin shook his head before he even realized he'd made a decision. "She's the one." Brielle blinked. "Wait, really? Even after the cactus?" "Yes," Corvin said. It was the most confident he had sounded all afternoon. Soft music fades into a warmer tone as the camera pulls back. Chapter 4. Practice before the first event. 3 days before the first major investor event, Corvin suggested they meet to practice, just to make sure we look like normal people walking in the same direction, he had said. Brielle arrived 10 minutes early, clutching an iced caramel drink the size of a toddler. This was half off, she explained, when she saw Corvin's raised brow. Otherwise, I would never risk something this dangerously large. Corvin blinked. "Is that caramel on caramel? Please don't judge me until after the event. After that, you can judge me a little." He almost smiled. They practiced small talk. They practiced walking arm in arm without looking awkward. They practiced greeting imaginary donors and investors. At one point, Brielle attempted a graceful wave and smacked her own notebook off the table. She froze. "Please pretend that didn't happen." Corvin looked at the notebook on the floor, then at her. "Gravity is unforgiving," he offered dryly. She squinted. "Was that a joke?" "Yes." She gasped dramatically. "You joke?" He looked away as if embarrassed to be caught being human. Then they practiced introductions. Brielle attempted, "Hello, I'm Brielle," but somehow mispronounced her own name as Brielle. She froze. "I don't know why I said that. Please don't fire me before I even start." Corvin smothered a laugh, really smothered it this time, pressing his lips together like the sound might betray him. "It's fine," he said gently. "Nobody's perfect. Tell that to the rich people," she muttered, before catching herself. "Oh, not you. I mean, you're rich, but okay, I should stop talking." Corvin shook his head in mild amusement, a subtle warmth growing behind his eyes that he didn't recognize. He hadn't expected someone so different from him to be the first person in years to ease his social anxiety. By the end of their session, they were more comfortable, not perfect, not polished, but real. And real felt better than perfect. Chapter 5. The first event. The charity gala sparkled with soft, elegant lighting that bounced beautifully off crystal chandeliers. Waiters moved gracefully through the crowd, balancing trays of haws, d'oeuvres that Brielle couldn't pronounce, and Corvin couldn't name. Corvin wore a simple black suit that gave him an air of quiet authority. Brielle wore a rented navy dress, elegant but understated, flowing just enough when she walked to make her feel like she belonged, even if she didn't believe it fully. Right before they entered, Corvin murmured, "If you feel overwhelmed, just signal." "What's the signal?" She tapped her nose lightly. "Like this." Corvin blinked. "Won't that look odd?" "I'll blend it in," she whispered. "Trust me." "I'm a professional panicker." He exhaled through his nose. "That doesn't reassure me." "Good," she said cheerfully. "Then we're bonding." They stepped into the ballroom. Almost instantly, Brielle sensed a few eyes drifting toward her. Her dress wasn't expensive. Her confidence wasn't polished. She didn't glide. She walked like someone trying to remember not to knock over fancy sculptures. But she smiled, genuine, warm, relatable. And oddly, it worked. People weren't drawn to her appearance. They were drawn to her sincerity. At one point, she lifted a bite-sized appetizer from a tray and whispered, "What is this?" "Crostini," Corvin murmured. She took a bite, then whispered again, "It tastes like bread that went to private school." Corvin choked, actually choked on his water, coughing into his sleeve. She patted his back gently. "You okay?" He nodded, eyes watering, but a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. As the night went on, Corvin watched Brielle in awe. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't pretend she belonged. She simply existed in her own way, open, charming, imperfect, in the most refreshing way possible. His shoulders, usually tense at events, lowered naturally the longer she stayed at his side. When guests approached him, Brielle subtly steadied him with light, natural conversation, filling awkward silences with humor or small anecdotes. And for the first time in years, Corvin didn't feel alone. Later, as they exited the event, Corvin said softly, "You did well." "So did you," Brielle replied. "You looked like someone who actually enjoys these things." "That's concerning," he admitted. She laughed, a soft, melodic sound that floated effortlessly into the cool night air. And Corvin found himself hoping he'd hear that laugh again soon. Chapter 4. Raising Rowan. If someone had asked Darian Cole what his greatest fear was before becoming a father, he might have said failure, or disappointment, or letting people down. But after he adopted Rowan, he realized his greatest fear was far simpler, not being enough for the tiny human now depending on him. On the first morning after the adoption, Darian woke before dawn, a habit built from years of early meetings. But this time, a small, warm weight rested beside him on the bed. Rowan had crawled over sometime during the night and fallen asleep with his tiny hand gripping a corner of Darian's shirt. Darian lay still for several minutes, watching the soft rise and fall of the child's breathing. He had signed legal papers. He had passed inspections. He had learned about baby-proofing, schedules, and pediatric visits. But none of that prepared him for the swell of emotion that hit him while staring at the sleeping child who trusted him completely. "Good morning," he whispered when Rowan stirred. Rowan blinked up with sleepy eyes, then snuggled closer, as though Darian was a safe place he had known all his life. Darian exhaled softly. "Okay," he murmured. "I can do this. We can do this." It began with small adjustments, replacing fragile decor with soft edges, rearranging the living room into a play area, learning which snacks Rowan refused to eat, anything green, discovering which toys he preferred, anything with wheels. But the most unexpected part was the warmth that bloomed inside Darian as he learned how to parent. During breakfast one morning, Rowan smeared yogurt across his cheek instead of eating it. Darian nearly panicked. Unsure whether to laugh or cry, Rowan simply looked at him with that same curious expression, waiting to see how Darian would react. Darian slowly reached for a napkin, wiped Rowan's cheek, and Rowan giggled, delighted. That sound, pure and sweet, filled a part of Darian's home he didn't realize had been empty. Not everything was easy. Rowan had nights where he woke crying without reason. Nights where memories from the shelter, small, blurry but painful, rose to the surface. During one stormy night, thunder rumbled outside, and Rowan began to sob, reaching out desperately. Darian lifted him immediately, rocking him gently. "You're safe," he whispered, again and again. "I'm right here." Rowan's fists clung to Darian's shirt, tiny tears soaking into the fabric. Darian didn't sleep that night. But Rowan finally did. Slowly, the penthouse became a home. Crayon marks appeared on the refrigerator. Tiny socks filled the laundry hamper. Cartoons replaced business news. Rowan's laughter echoed through the halls. And one day, as Darian stood by the kitchen counter, watching Rowan chase a toy car across the floor, he realized something profound. He wasn't lonely anymore. The ache he used to feel every night, the emptiness that lived behind his success, gone, replaced by something brighter, something alive, something called family. When Rowan turned 3, Bria suggested enrolling him in an early learning preschool to help him socialize. Darian hesitated. He didn't want Rowan feeling overwhelmed or abandoned. But Bria explained gently, children grow when they explore. You've given him a home. Now help him find his world. So Darian took a breath and agreed. The first day of preschool was chaotic. Rowan clung to Darian's leg with surprising strength. Tears welled up in his eyes. His tiny lip quivered. It's okay, Darian whispered. I'll be back soon, I promise. Rowan looked unconvinced. Soon, Darian repeated softly. A teacher approached, calm, warm, reassuring, and crouched beside Rowan. Hi, sweetheart, she said. We have lots of fun toys today. Would you like to see? Rowan looked at Darian, then the teacher, then back to Darian. Slowly, he loosened his grip, not completely, but enough. And when Darian left the room, he paused at the door, heart knotted, watching as Rowan hesitantly reached for a puzzle piece. That was the moment Darian understood something new. Love wasn't just holding on. Love was also learning when to let go, just enough for someone to grow. Chapter 5. Meeting Marin. Rowan's preschool teacher noticed something within the first week. Rowan struggled to express emotions verbally. He was affectionate, bright, and gentle, but when he felt something strongly, he withdrew into quietness rather than speaking about it. The teacher gently recommended an early development therapist named Marin Hale. Darian had never heard of her, but the way the teacher spoke, softly, respectfully, made him agree to meet her. He scheduled an evaluation. The moment Marin Hale walked into the room, Darian felt something shift. She wasn't loud or overly cheerful like some children's specialists. Instead, she carried a calming energy, gentle but confident, grounded but warm. Her presence made the room feel instantly softer. Marin knelt in front of Rowan, her eyes level with his. Hi, Rowan, she said softly. I'm Marin. I'd really like to play with you today, if that's okay. Rowan didn't speak, but he didn't hide behind Darian either. He simply watched her, curious. That was enough for Marin. Do you like to draw? She asked, pulling out crayons. I brought colors you might like. Rowan's eyes lit slightly at the sight of the crayons. He reached toward a dark green one, then hesitated and glanced at Darian, as if asking permission. It's okay, Darian whispered with a smile. Rowan took the crayon, and a connection formed, quiet but unmistakable. After the session, Marin invited Darian to step outside the playroom. She spoke honestly but kindly. Rowan is wonderful, she began. Soft-hearted, observant, very intelligent. He just needs support learning how to express his emotions with confidence. Darian nodded slowly. I try. I really do. I know, she said gently. He trusts you deeply. That's clear. Her tone shifted slightly, thoughtful. But he also needs someone who can help him explore feelings he doesn't have words for yet. Her eyes flicked toward the playroom, where Rowan was now stacking blocks with surprising focus. And I think I can help. There was no arrogance in her voice, just sincerity. Darian felt something warm settle in his chest. Over the next several weeks, Marin worked with Rowan twice a week. At first, Darian stayed in the room. Then he sat just outside. Eventually, Marin encouraged him to wait in the lobby, saying, sometimes children open up more when they aren't worried about disappointing the person they love most. The phrase stunned him. The person they love most. Was that what he was to Rowan? But he saw the truth every session. Rowan greeted Marin more warmly each time, yet always looked over his shoulder to make sure Darian was still there. After each session, Marin updated him. Today he shared a drawing about feeling lonely. He told me he likes soft music. He said he dreams about running. I think he's starting to feel freer. And slowly, respectfully, Marin eased her way into their lives. One late afternoon, after a particularly successful session, Darian and Marin found themselves alone in the hallway while Rowan colored in the corner. You're doing a wonderful job with him, Marin said softly. Darian gave a tired smile. I hope so. I feel like I'm guessing half the time. That's parenting, she laughed. If anyone tells you otherwise, they're lying. He laughed too, a sound that surprised him. He didn't usually laugh around new people. Marin noticed. Her eyes softened. You don't let people see you relax often, do you? Darian blinked. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who pays attention. He didn't know what to say to that. So he didn't say anything. And somehow, that silence wasn't uncomfortable. One evening, as Marin prepared to leave after a session, Rowan reached for her hand. She paused, looking down at him. He held up a drawing, a stick figure picture of 3 people, a small child, a man and a woman. Rowan pointed at the woman, then at Marin. Darian's breath caught. Marin knelt, touched Rowan's cheek gently and whispered, "That means a lot." For the rest of the night, Darian couldn't stop thinking about the drawing. A family of 3. Rowan saw it. He felt it. And Darian, for the first time, allowed himself to imagine it too. Chapter 6. Growing Connection. As the weeks turned into months, Marin became a gentle thread woven into the rhythm of Darian and Rowan's life. Not forced, not rushed. Simply present, like sunlight warming a cold room. Rowan adored her. He would run to the door when she visited, grabbing her hand and tugging her inside before she even took off her coat. And each time, Marin would laugh softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Someone missed me," she'd say. Darian always found himself smiling at those words. Not just because Rowan missed her, but because he did too. Their connection didn't grow from grand gestures. It grew from small, everyday moments. Sometimes after a session, Marin would stay for a cup of tea while Rowan colored quietly. They'd talk about the day, about parenting, about life. "You're much more patient than you think," Marin told him once. Darian scoffed gently. "I feel like I'm always 2 seconds from messing everything up." "That's what makes you a good parent," she replied. "You care enough to worry." Her voice was soft but certain, the kind of reassurance Darian didn't realize he'd been craving. One afternoon, Marin taught Rowan how to paint with watercolors. Darian watched from the doorway as Rowan dipped the brush into blue paint and swirled it across the page. "You paint like you dream," Marin told him warmly. "Soft and bright." Darian stepped closer. "Is that good?" Marin looked up at him, eyes shining. "It's beautiful." And she wasn't just talking about the painting. On weekends, Marin sometimes joined them for walks. Rowan held both their hands, Darian's in one, Marin's in the other, swinging their arms as he hopped over cracks in the pavement. Passers-by often smiled as they walked by, a picture of a small, happy family. Darian felt it too, a whisper inside him, "This feels right." One evening, after Rowan fell asleep early, Marin lingered longer than usual. She stood by the window, gazing at the city lights. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Darian joined her, hands in his pockets. "Sometimes I forget to look at it." "Well," she replied, glancing at him with gentle humor, "that's because you're always working." He chuckled softly. "Maybe. Or maybe I needed someone to remind me that life isn't just spreadsheets and deadlines." Marin's eyes warmed. "You're doing more than you think. Rowan feels safe with you. That's not something money or success can buy." Her voice held sincerity that sank into him, reaching places he had kept guarded for years. "Marin," he said quietly, "I never expected someone like you to enter our lives." She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "And yet, here I am." The air between them shifted slightly, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a soft ripple of something unspoken, something close to affection, something close to hope. Darian didn't move toward her. Marin didn't step closer, but neither looked away. Sometimes love begins not with a kiss, not with touch, but with a moment like this. A moment two people feel something at the same time and silently acknowledge it. Marin's influence on Rowan was visible. He started expressing himself more clearly, pointing to pictures to show how he felt, using new words, leaning into hugs without hesitation. One day during a session, Marin told Darian, "He drew something today. I think you should see it." Darian knelt beside Rowan, who proudly held out his drawing. It was 3 stick figures: a little boy, a tall man, and a woman with long hair. Rowan pointed at them in order: me, Dad, Marin. Darian's heart squeezed. Marin stood behind them, covering her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. Rowan had drawn them as a family. It was innocent. It was simple. It was honest. And it changed everything. Chapter 7. The Letter That Changes Everything. Life settled into a warm, gentle rhythm, until the day everything changed. It began with a phone call. Darian had just returned from a meeting when his assistant buzzed him through. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." Darian frowned. "Who is it?" "A legal consultant named Hollin. He said it concerns your adoption records." A cold, tight feeling crept into Darian's chest. Adoption records? Now? After all these years? He asked her to send Hollin in. Hollin stepped inside the office, holding a worn envelope. His posture was uncertain, his expression tense. "Mr. Cole," he began, "I'm not sure how to say this, but during a recent audit at the shelter, we discovered some misplaced documents. One of them pertains to your son." Darian stared at the envelope. "Pertains? How?" "It's best if you read it." Darian took the envelope slowly, noticing the faded ink, the softened edges, signs of age and neglect. It felt oddly heavy in his hands. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, a mother's note. Rowan's birth mother. The words were rushed, panicked, yet heartbreakingly sincere. Darian read aloud silently. "They told me I had no options. I couldn't care for both of them. The boy and the girl. Twins. I left them at different places because I was afraid they'd be separated forever. I hoped they'd be adopted fast. I hoped they'd find homes. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." Darian's breath caught. "Both of them," he echoed. "Girl?" Hollin nodded slowly. "Yes." "Your son? He has a twin sister." The words hit Darian like a blow. A sister. Rowan had a sister. A twin. A child who might still be waiting in a shelter somewhere. Alone. Without family. Without knowledge of her brother. Darian's hands trembled as he held the note. Why? Why wasn't this discovered before? Hollin exhaled with discomfort. "We believe the document was misplaced years ago due to staff turnover. It was buried under old intake folders. A mistake. A serious one." Darian closed his eyes. This wasn't just an error. This was a life. A child's life. A child he had never known existed. When Marin arrived that evening for Rowan's session, Darian looked shaken, pale, unfocused, almost lost. "Darian?" she asked gently. "Are you okay?" He handed her the note. As she read it, her hand covered her mouth. Her eyes glistened. "Oh my," she whispered. "Rowan has a twin." Darian nodded. "I thought adopting him meant giving him everything he never had. Stability, love, a place to belong. But now," his voice broke. "What if she's still out there alone, Marin? What if she's waiting? What if she feels the same loneliness he used to feel?" Marin stepped closer, placing a steady hand on his arm. "Then we find her," she said. "Whatever it takes." Her voice was firm, unwavering. Darian looked into her eyes, and for the first time since receiving the note, he felt a thread of hope. That night, Rowan was unusually quiet during dinner. He pushed his peas around the plate, glancing between Darian and Marin, as if sensing the emotional heaviness hanging over them. At one point, he tugged on Darian's sleeve. "Dad? Sad?" he whispered. The question shattered Darian. He scooped Rowan into his arms, holding him close. "No, buddy," he whispered. "Not sad. Just thinking about something important." Rowan rested his head on his shoulder. Marin watched the two of them, her eyes soft, filled with both admiration and concern. Rowan sensed love. He sensed tension. He sensed something shifting. Children always do. Later, after Rowan was tucked into bed, Darian and Marin stood in the living room, the city lights flickering through the tall windows. "What do I do now?" Darian asked quietly. Marin stepped beside him, her voice calm but resolute. "You don't ignore it," she said. "You search for her. But what if she's already adopted? What if she doesn't want to meet him? What if—" "Darian," Marin interrupted gently, placing a hand on his arm. "Stop. You can't protect everyone from every outcome, but you can choose to try. You can choose to do what's right." He looked at her, truly looked at her. Her eyes were full of steady, unwavering support. "I'm scared," he admitted. "I know," she said softly. "But you're not alone." Their eyes met. The world softened. Something deepened. Then she said the words that would steer the next chapter of his life. "Let's find his sister." Chapter 8. Searching for the Twin. That night, long after Rowan fell asleep, Darian sat at the dining table with the worn letter spread out in front of him. The lamp above cast a soft golden circle of light, leaving the rest of the room in shadow. He read the mother's words again. The boy and the girl, twins. His breath still caught every time. Marin sat beside him, her hand resting gently near his on the table, not quite touching but close enough to feel reassuring. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. Darian nodded, but his voice shook slightly. "I don't know where to begin. We start with who gave you this letter," she replied. "Hollin mentioned it came from archived shelter files. That means someone, somewhere, must have processed the girl." Darian rubbed his forehead. "If those files were misplaced, who knows what else was misfiled?" "Then we track every possibility," Marin said calmly. "We don't stop until we find her." Her certainty softened something inside him. He wasn't alone in this. The next morning, Darian and Marin met Hollin at the shelter's administrative office. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly overhead, and the stale smell of old paperwork filled the room. "Thank you for coming," Hollin said, clearing his throat nervously. "I know this is overwhelming." Darian held the letter tightly. "Do you know where she is?" Hollin grimaced. "Not yet. The intake form mentions that the mother left the girl at a shelter 2 towns away, but the name was smudged. Water damage. We're working on restoring the file." Darian exhaled slowly. Marin stepped in gently. "What's the earliest record you can trace?" 2 potential shelters," Hollin replied. "One closed years ago. The other is still operating." "So we start there," Marin said firmly. Hollin nodded. "I'll make calls. But Mr. Cole, there's no guarantee she's still in the system. She might have been adopted." Darian swallowed hard. He wanted her to be adopted, to have a family, stability, love. But he also feared that if she had grown up without Rowan, without the connection that was stolen from them, the wound might run deep. "We'll find her," Marin whispered to him again. And somehow, Darian believed her. The next morning, Darian placed Rowan in the car seat. The little boy hugged Mim the rabbit tightly, unaware of the enormous weight resting on the adult's shoulders. "Where are we going?" he asked softly. Darian hesitated. Marin answered carefully. "We're just visiting someone who might know something important." Rowan nodded, trusting her completely. The drive to the old town took nearly 2 hours. Marin sat in the back seat with Rowan, reading him picture books and pointing out trucks along the highway. Darian watched them through the rearview mirror. Marin's gentle expression, Rowan leaning on her shoulder, the quiet warmth they shared. A strange thought entered his mind. This is what a family looks like. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, shaken by the realization. The first shelter was a small, aging building with peeling paint and a sagging porch. A handwritten sign hung in the window, closed permanently. A neighbor explained the shelter had shut down 5 years earlier. "No forwarding records?" Darian asked. She shook her head sadly. Everything was boxed up and sent to a county facility. No idea what they did with it. Darian's shoulders slumped. Rowan tugged his sleeve. "Dad." "Okay." He forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay." But he wasn't. Marin stepped beside him, touching his arm gently. This was just the first stop. Her tone wasn't pitying. It was steady, encouraging. "Let's try the second shelter," she said softly. And so they did. The second shelter was cleaner, newer and still operating. Children played in a secure outdoor area. Volunteers moved between rooms carrying blankets and snack trays. A kind-faced woman approached them. "Can I help you?" Holin had called ahead, so she already recognized Darian's name. "You're looking for records of a girl left here several years ago," she said. "Let's check the archives." They followed her into a back room lined with labeled boxes. Dust floated through the air as she opened one container after another. After nearly 15 minutes, she pulled out a thin folder. "It's not much," she warned. Darian held his breath. Inside was a single sheet. Intake report. Female infant, approximately 10 months old. No identifying documents. Left outside the door. Temporary name assigned, Ria. Marin gasped softly. "Ria," she whispered. "That's her. That has to be her." The woman nodded. "She stayed with us for 2 months until she was transferred to another shelter with more resources for infants. They should have the rest of her history." "Which shelter was that?" Darian asked urgently. She handed him the transfer slip. Darian felt a huge exhale leave his chest. A direction, a name, a chance. "We're going," he said softly. Marin smiled, relieved, proud, hopeful. "We're getting closer." Chapter 9. Finding Ria. The final shelter sat at the edge of a quiet town. It was simple but well kept, with murals on the walls and a play area filled with colorful toys. When they entered, Rowan held tightly to Marin's hand. He sensed the seriousness around him. A staff member greeted them warmly. "You must be Mr. Cole. We've been expecting you." Darian nodded, swallowing the emotion rising in his throat. "We're looking for information on a girl transferred here as an infant. Her name is Ria." The staff member's expression softened. "Let's step into my office." Inside the office, she retrieved a file from a locked cabinet. "This is everything we have on her." Darian opened the folder. There she was. A tiny photograph of a baby girl with dark curls and wide, curious eyes. She looked so much like Rowan that Darian's breath caught in his chest. Marin leaned closer, covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "Oh, Darian. She looks just like him." The staff member nodded. "She was a quiet baby, gentle, observant, much like your son." Rowan, sitting on Marin's lap, peeked at the photo with wide eyes. "Baby," he whispered softly. "Yes," Marin murmured, "a very special baby." Darian steadied himself. "Where is she now? Was she adopted?" The woman hesitated before answering. "No, she hasn't been adopted. She's still here." Silence. Then, "Can we see her?" Darian asked in a trembling voice. The woman nodded. "I'll bring her." They waited in a small playroom. Rowan sat on the carpet holding Mim, rocking slightly. Marin placed a gentle hand on his back. Then the door opened, and a little girl stepped inside. She was small, just like Rowan at that age, wearing a yellow dress and clutching a faded blanket with embroidered stars. Her curls framed her round face. Her eyes, large, amber, familiar, met Darian's instantly. Marin inhaled sharply. "It's her," she whispered. Ria looked around the room, cautious but curious. Then her gaze settled on Rowan. The twins stared at each other, motionless. Rowan stood. Ria stood too. They took a step toward each other, then another, until they stood only inches apart. Ria reached out first, touching Rowan's hand softly, gently. Rowan's fingers curled around hers. They didn't speak. They didn't smile. They simply recognized. A bond formed long before they had language. A connection deeper than memory. A twin bond. Marin covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. "This is incredible," she whispered. "They know each other. They feel it." Darian felt tears burning his eyes too. His son wasn't alone in this world. He never had been. A missing piece had been found. After a minute, Ria turned toward Darian. She looked up at him with the same cautious curiosity Rowan had shown the first day they met. Slowly she walked toward him. She lifted her blanket slightly, as if offering something. Darian knelt, overwhelmed. "Hi, sweetheart," he whispered. Ria placed the blanket in his hands. Marin gasped quietly. "She trusts you." Darian swallowed hard. He held the blanket with trembling fingers. "Thank you," he said softly. Ria leaned lightly against his knee. Rowan toddled over and pressed his shoulder to Darian's arm too, their small bodies forming the shape of a family before the adults even processed it. Marin knelt beside them, brushing Ria's curls softly. "She was meant to be here," she whispered. They all were. Darian looked at the twins, Rowan gripping Mim, Ria clutching his sleeve, both of them leaning into him as if this were the moment they'd waited their whole short lives for. And in that moment, Darian knew he would fight for her. He would bring her home. He would make their family whole. This wasn't just a discovery, it was destiny. Chapter 10. Rebuilding a Family. After the first meeting with Ria, the world seemed to shift around Darian. The air felt different, the colors sharper, his heart heavier yet fuller than ever before. The drive home was quiet. Rowan sat in the back, holding Mim in one hand and Marin's fingers in the other. He wasn't talkative, but he wasn't withdrawn either. He simply seemed thoughtful, processing something he didn't yet have words for. "What happens now?" Marin asked softly from the passenger seat. Darian tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Now," he said, "I fight for her." The next morning, Darian returned to the shelter to file an adoption intent form for Ria, but the staff warned him gently. It may take time, many evaluations, multiple visits, a careful legal review. Darian nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." But the journey was more complicated than he imagined. "Your household is about to change, Mr. Cole. We need updated assessments. The previous oversight caused complications. You adopted Rowan years ago. Why adopt his sister now?" Darian answered every question with honesty. "Because I didn't know she existed, and now that I do, I can't leave her behind." Some nodded respectfully. Others remained skeptical, but none of it deterred him. Over the next several weeks, Ria visited the Cole home regularly. The first visit was gentle, short and simple. She explored the living room with cautious excitement, touching furniture, examining books, and sitting beside Rowan as though she'd always belonged there. Rowan watched her carefully, sometimes shy, sometimes fascinated, sometimes protective. When Ria picked up one of his cars, he didn't grab it back. He just scooted closer, as if wanting to share space with her. Marin noticed and smiled. They're figuring each other out. Ria's second visit was livelier. She giggled when Darian pretended to be confused about how puzzles worked. She followed Rowan around the apartment like a tiny shadow. She held Marin's hand freely. By the fifth visit, she ran inside and hugged Darian's leg on her own. No hesitation. Darian wasn't prepared for the emotions that moment stirred inside him. One Saturday afternoon, Marin stayed to help watch the children. The four of them played in the living room. Blocks, crayons, dolls, toy cars. At one point, Rowan handed Ria half of his crackers. She eagerly accepted, then broke one in half and handed the piece back to him. Marin touched Darian's arm. "That's connection," she whispered. "They trust each other." He looked at the twins, their soft gestures, their mirrored movements, the little unspoken language forming between them. And then he looked at Marin. Her presence felt natural, comforting, as though she had always belonged here too. Just when things were progressing smoothly, a complication emerged. During a legal review meeting, one evaluator asked, "Mr. Cole, you're a single parent with a demanding career. Adding a second child, especially one with potential emotional needs, is a significant responsibility. Are you certain you can manage that?" Darian opened his mouth to answer, but hesitated. Not because he doubted himself, but because the evaluator was right. About one thing, raising two children alone would be difficult. Before he could respond, Marin spoke up. "I help with Rowan's development regularly," she said calmly. "And I'm willing to help Ria too. The children feel safe with both of us." The evaluator raised an eyebrow. "And Your relationship to Mr. Cole. Marin flushed lightly. We're friends, but more importantly, I'm committed to the children's well-being. Darian felt warmth in his chest, not just from what she said, but from the courage it took to say it. Her presence strengthened his case, and strengthened something else within him. Later that evening, after the evaluator left, Darian thanked Marin. You didn't have to speak up, he said softly. Yes, I did, Marin replied, because they deserve stability, and because you don't have to carry this alone. Darian met her gaze, struck by the sincerity there. Marin, I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done. She smiled gently. You don't repay love, Darian. You just give it where it's needed. He paused. Something about her words sank deep, not just into his heart, but into the growing space they shared as a family. Chapter 11. New Beginnings. The day the adoption was approved started like any other, except Darian woke with a tightness in his chest, a mix of hope and fear. He dressed Rowan in a clean shirt. Comb in hand, he smoothed down the little boy's hair, earning a sleepy giggle. Rhea, coming? Rowan asked through the mirror. Hopefully, Darian whispered. If everything goes well. Rowan nodded, content with that answer. Marin arrived shortly after, wearing a light sweater and a warm smile. Today's the day, she said softly. He nodded. I'm nervous. You care, she answered. That's why. The courtroom was small, sunlit through tall windows. A judge sat behind a polished wooden bench, reading through Darian's file. Rhea sat on Marin's lap, clutching her star blanket. Rowan sat beside Darian, swinging his legs, humming softly. The judge finally looked up. Mr. Cole, she said, I've reviewed the file extensively, given the circumstances, the sibling relationship, and your demonstrated commitment. Darian held his breath. I am prepared to approve your adoption of Rhea, pending final signatures. Marin squeezed his hand beneath the table. Rowan leaned into him. Rhea looked up, recognizing the shift in emotion, even if she didn't understand the words. Darian exhaled. Not just a breath, a release of months of tension. Thank you, he whispered. The drive home felt different. The family felt different. Rhea played with Rowan's fingers in the back seat. He didn't pull away. Instead, he gently placed Mim in her lap, the rabbit that had once been his anchor. Marin glanced at Darian from the passenger seat, tears still shimmering faintly. You did it, she whispered. No, he corrected gently. We did. That evening, Marin stayed to help settle Rhea into the home. They set up a small bed beside Rowan's, soft blankets, stuffed animals, warm lighting. Rhea explored quietly, her small hands brushing over each new object. Rowan followed her step by step, pointing things out. That's my book. That's my truck. That's nightlight. Rhea nodded solemnly at each explanation. Marin knelt beside them. You two are going to take care of each other, aren't you? Rhea touched Rowan's shoulder. He touched hers back. Later, when the children were asleep, Darian walked into the living room and stood by the window. The skyline glowed beneath the night sky. Marin approached quietly. You're thinking again, she teased softly. He laughed under his breath. I can't help it. Today happened so fast. Fast, she agreed, but right. He turned toward her. Marin, thank you. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You don't owe me anything, she whispered. I do, he insisted. You've become important to us. To Rowan, to Rhea. She swallowed, emotion flickering across her face. And what about you? She asked softly. Darian stepped closer. You already know, he replied. Her breath trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the quiet recognition of something they had both felt growing for months. He didn't touch her. She didn't move closer, but they stood there, facing each other, hearts open in the calm simplicity of a moment that felt inevitable. The next morning, Darian woke to quiet laughter. The twins were sitting on the living room floor, touching their toes together, giggling softly. Marin stood in the doorway, smiling with sleepy eyes. They waited for you to wake up, she whispered. For me? She nodded. They look for you first thing. Darian walked into the room. Both children turned instantly and grinned. A small voice escaped Ria's lips. Dad. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. Darian knelt, pulling them both into his arms as Marin watched with tears in her eyes. A new beginning. A real family. A home rebuilt from broken pieces. And this was only the start. Chapter 12. The romantic turn. The days after Ria's adoption were some of the warmest in Darian's life. The home once filled with silence was now alive with tiny footsteps, bursts of laughter, and the gentle rhythm of children learning how to share space and love. And Marin had become a steady presence, as natural to the home as sunlight slipping through the curtains. Where Ria toddled, Marin followed. Where Rowan needed quiet reassurance, Marin knelt. Where Darian struggled to put emotions into words, Marin understood without asking. The four of them moved like a unit now, an imperfect, chaotic, beautiful little family. But something was changing beneath the surface. Something soft. Something warm. Something neither Darian nor Marin could keep ignoring. One night, after the twins drifted to sleep early from an exhausting day of play, Marin stayed behind to help Darian tidy the living room. Crayons were scattered. Blankets were half-folded. Picture books lay open on the floor. The two adults moved in quiet harmony. She stacked blocks while he put away toy cars. Their movement synced effortlessly, like a pair who had been doing this for years instead of months. When they finished, Darian sank onto the couch with a sigh. Marin joined him, sitting a bit closer than usual. Not enough to startle him, but enough for her warmth to settle beside him. "You're getting good at this," she teased gently. "At what?" he asked. "Being a dad." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I feel like I'm fumbling through it." "All parents do," she replied. "The difference is that you care enough to try. That's what makes you a natural." He looked at her then. Not just glanced, looked, really looked. For months he'd admired her compassion, her patience, the softness in her voice when she spoke to Rowan and Ria. He noticed how she knelt to their level, how she guided without forcing, how she listened even when they didn't speak. But tonight, he saw something deeper. He saw the woman who had stepped into the cracks of his life and filled them with light. He saw the person who made his once lonely home warm. He saw the one who held his children with care and held his heart without even trying. Marin noticed his longer gaze and felt her breath catch. "What?" she whispered. Darian swallowed. "I just wanted to thank you for everything, for being here, for helping me, for loving them." Her expression softened, beautifully, vulnerably. "And what about you, Darian?" she asked softly. "Do you ever let people love you?" He blinked, caught off guard. I don't know how." Marin shifted slightly closer, her voice just above a whisper. "You're learning." She didn't touch him. He didn't reach for her. But the space between them dissolved. And for a moment, the world outside the dim living room faded away. The twins stirred faintly down the hall, but did not wake. Their soft breaths filled the silence. Marin looked at Darian's hands, strong, steady, capable. Slowly, gently, she placed her fingertips on the back of his hand. He didn't pull away. In fact, he turned his hand palm up, letting her small fingers settle into his. The connection was subtle but electric, warm, reassuring, real. Marin gave a tiny, breathy laugh. "I've been waiting for you to do that." Darian shook his head lightly. "Honestly? I've been waiting too." They didn't rush. They didn't lean in dramatically. Instead, they shared a moment filled with quiet understanding, the kind of understanding that only grows after months of building something real, something like love. The next morning, the twins woke early and crawled into Darian's room. Ria snuggled into his arm while Rowan tapped his shoulder eagerly. "Marin coming?" he whispered. Darian blinked awake, startled. Probably later." Rowan grinned. "Good." Ria nodded as though agreeing. Darian laughed softly. Even at their young age, the twins sensed connection, how Marin belonged in their world, in their home, in their hearts. Later that day, when Marin arrived, both children ran toward her with little squeals of joy. Ria hugged her leg. Rowan grabbed her hand. Marin looked up at Darian, cheeks warming. "They're getting attached," she whispered. He smiled. "They're not the only ones." Marin's breath caught. And though neither spoke it aloud, they both knew what was happening. Love wasn't arriving in a dramatic flash. It was blooming quietly, naturally, beautifully. Chapter 13. Final moral message. A few weeks later, the Cole home felt complete in a way Darian had once believed impossible. There were still rough days, messy mornings, tantrums, early bedtimes, and sleepless nights. But there was also laughter echoing off the walls, tiny hands tugging at his shirt, drawings taped to the refrigerator, Marin humming while helping the twins put on socks, Rowan and Ria curling up beside him during story time. Life was full, messy, impermanent, but undeniably full. One sunny afternoon, Darian, Marin, and the twins walked through a nearby park. The path was lined with tall trees, their branches swaying in a warm breeze. Ria held Marin's hand. Rowan held Darian's. At one point, the twins stopped to examine a ladybug on a leaf. They squatted side by side, whispering to each other in their soft toddler voices. Marin leaned closer to Darian, smiling softly at the scene. "They're learning about the world together," she whispered. He nodded. "They're learning what it means to have someone beside them. And so are you," she teased gently. Darian chuckled. "Yeah, I guess I am." Marin's voice softened. "You've built something beautiful here, Darian." He exhaled. "Not alone." "No," she agreed. "Not alone." That evening, when the twins were tucked into bed, Darian walked onto the balcony, feeling the cool night breeze against his face. Marin joined him, standing beside him in silence. Darian finally spoke. "You know, I used to think success meant climbing higher, reaching more, making more, being more." Marin listened quietly. "But then I adopted Rowan, and then Ria, and then you came into our lives, and I realized something." He turned toward her. "Success isn't about what you build alone. It's about who you build life with." Marin's eyes shimmered. "I think you finally understand," she whispered. He nodded. "I do." Marin took a slow breath, gathering courage. "Darian, I care about them, deeply. But I also care about you." He stepped closer, heart pounding softly. "And I care about you," he replied. But Marin wasn't done. "I don't want to rush anything," she said gently. "But I'm here, and I'm willing to grow something real, with all of you." Darian reached out and took her hand, fully, confidently this time. "We already are," he whispered. The next morning, the twins woke up early again. They shuffled into the living room and climbed onto the couch beside Darian and Marin, who were sharing quiet coffee. Rowan sat on Darian's lap. Ria curled into Marin's side. The twins looked at each other, then at the two adults, and each placed a small hand on the adult's arms, connecting the circle. Marin smiled. Darian's eyes softened. It was as if the twins were saying, "We choose this. We choose you. We choose family." The camera would fade slowly to the four of them sitting together, morning light filling the room. Darian's voice narrates softly. "There was a time I believed love wasn't meant for me, that family was something other people had, that my past determined my future. But then I met a quiet little boy holding a worn rabbit, and then a small girl with curls and brave eyes, and then a woman who taught us all how to speak the language of the heart. Family isn't about blood. It's about choosing each other over and over again. It's about healing together, growing together, becoming whole together." He looks at Rowan and Ria as they giggle softly between him and Marin. "And sometimes, the family you're meant to have finds you in the most unexpected ways." Life doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it breaks quietly, behind closed doors, in moments no one applauds, in questions we don't know how to ask out loud. This story reminds us of something powerful. Even when life feels incomplete, it isn't finished. Darian didn't wake up one day fearless or ready. He showed up scared, unsure, carrying doubts heavier than his confidence. Yet step by step, he chose love over comfort, effort over excuses, and hope over fear. And because of that, what once felt broken slowly became whole. If you're watching this, and you feel like you've lost time, lost direction, or lost pieces of yourself along the way, hear this clearly: you are not behind. You are becoming. Picking up the pieces doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt. It means honoring what you've survived and deciding you're still worth the rebuild. Some of the most beautiful chapters begin after confusion, after loss, after long nights of uncertainty. So don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on love. Don't give up on tomorrow. Here at RustRoad Stories, we believe every road, no matter how rough, can lead somewhere meaningful. Thank you for being here. Thank you for walking this road with us.